My name is Delia Kessler. I'm 36. I'm a CPA, and last March my family held a vote on my father's land. There were 11 people at that table. Nobody invited the county recorder, which turned out to be the only opinion that mattered. They gave me 8%. 8% of $4,260,000. And when I ran that number the way I run every number start to finish, out loud, twice I found out something none of them had bothered to check. If I signed their paper, I wouldn't walk away with $340,000. I'd walk away $662,000 in debt. They had set a place for me the way you set a place for a guest. Water poured, napkin folded into a triangle, and laid across the top of a 4-page document in a clear plastic cover, tabbed in yellow at every signature line. A pen. Someone had tied a small white bow around the barrel of it. Sit with that a second, because I still do. Somebody in my family went to a drawer, found ribbon, and tied a bow onto the pen I was supposed to use to sign away my father's farm. That was somebody's idea of a kindness. That's the part I still turn over at 2 in the morning. In the corner, on a folding chair carried up from the garage, sat a woman named Bernadette Cool, Bernie. She runs a mobile notary service out of Heath, mostly car titles and nursing home paperwork. And my mother had booked her for 7 o'clock. She kept her coat on and her stamp bag on her knees. And she did not look at me once all evening. I've never held that against her. She'd been told she was coming to a celebration, 11 people, a notary, and a pen with a bow on it. Here is what none of them knew. The paper I carried into that dining room was not the one they printed, and it wasn't a lawyer who wrote it. It was my father, and he wrote it in 2016, and he never told a soul. But if I start there, you'll get the wrong idea about me. You'll picture a woman who got lucky with a document. That is not who sat down in that chair. So let me back up 11 days. A man named Terry came into my office on a Tuesday holding an envelope like it was hot. He lays flooring, and he hadn't slept in 4 days. The IRS had sent him a CP 2000 an automated notice. The kind that arrives without a human ever reading your file, and it said he owed $9,400 he did not have. My office is 2 rooms above a shoe repair shop in Newark, Ohio. The smell of polish and cut leather comes up through the floorboards around 7 every morning, and I don't notice it anymore unless someone new asks what it is. I read his notice in about 40 seconds. Then I asked 2 questions. Did you sell anything in 2023? Besides the Fidelity account, and do you still have the closing statement from your mother's house? He had it. In his truck. In a folder his sister had made him. The brokerage had reported gross proceeds and left the cost basis blank. The computer assumed he'd paid nothing for a house that had been in his family since 1974, so it did what machines do, it taxed the whole sale price as pure profit. He didn't owe $9,400. He owed $118. Terry cried at my desk, not loudly. He put a hand over his eyes and apologized twice for it. I can do that for a stranger in 4 minutes. It took me 11 years to do it for myself. Let me tell you why. Because here is what I've learned on my side of that desk. Watching people come apart over paper. The people who call you selfish for keeping what's yours were never planning to share what was theirs. Yolanda Reyes has worked for me 6 years. She gets in at 7 before the polish smell finishes climbing the floorboards, and makes coffee in a machine older than both of us because she says mine tastes like a receipt. Yoli runs the front, the filing, and most of my personality on the phone, 2 of us. That's the whole firm. I got here the slow way, cashier at Kroger, 4 to 11, night classes at the branch campus, then a folding table in a rented room at 28, my name on a sheet of paper taped to the door, Delia Kessler, CPA. I taped it crooked and left it crooked a year, because straightening it felt like admitting I cared. None of that is what you need to understand. What matters is the ground. 142 acres on Dutch Fork Road, past where the county stops bothering with center lines. My great-grandfather bought it in 1911 with money he made shoeing horses. Every Kessler since has argued about it, farmed it, mortgaged it, or left it, and none of us got free of it. There's a creek along the western edge, and standing over that creek is a sycamore. If you're not from here, you don't know sycamores. The bark sheds in plates as the tree grows, and underneath it is white, not gray. White so in February, when everything else is the color of wet cardboard, that tree stands on the field line like something lit from inside. Ours is wider than two people can reach around. My father and I tried every few years and never made it. It became a joke, then a tradition, and then, after he was gone, a thing I do alone in October with my arms out like an idiot. He told me once, the two of us leaning on the tailgate, that tree was here before us and it'll be here after. Everything in between is bookkeeping. My father was a welder. He fixed farm machinery out of the barn for anybody who asked and kept his numbers in a book you can still buy for about $11 black cloth. Stamped in gold. Ohio State University Extension Farm. Record book. 2 columns, date everything, initial everything. He sat me down with it when I was 9 and taught me double entry accounting at the kitchen table, a strange thing to do to a child, and the most useful thing anyone ever did for me. Keep your own book, D, he said. Family forgets what it borrows. Paper doesn't. I have that book now. On page 40, there is a thumbprint of machine oil, pressed in the day he came from the barn with something he had to write down before he lost it. It's been there since 1998. Nobody wiped it. Nobody ever will. So, my own book. 11 years of entries, and here is what they say. The furnace at my mother's house. January 2017. 4 tires for Shelby when the tread went and she had the kids in the car. 2 bridge loans to my brother Dale, both called short-term on the phone, both still open. Cole's tuition the year the school raised it, and Dale's spring ran slow, and $1,900 into an investment opportunity of Marcus's that was not a multi-level marketing company. Right up until the week it was, not $1 came back, not once, not partially. I want to be fair, because I've had a long time to think about whether I am. I gave all of it freely. Nobody forged my name. I wrote every check myself, and some of the time I felt good doing it. But one entry sits by itself. I was 27. The transmission went out in my Corolla the second week of March tax season. The 5 weeks a year I actually earn my living, and 4 days later a wisdom tooth went septic and the surgeon wanted payment up front. I was $900 short. I drove to my mother's house and asked, and because I am who I am, I brought a repayment schedule, written out, $200 a month for 5 months. I offered to sign it. She looked at it. She didn't pick it up. "Honey," she said, "we don't have it to spare." 2 weeks later, she had a new kitchen counter. I know exactly when, because she hosted her church circle to show it off and posted 11 photographs. Dale said, "You're the numbers 1. D, figure it out." I figured it out. I rode the bus, then a coworker's back seat. 5 weeks, in March, in Ohio, with my jaw packed in gauze. One person noticed, my Aunt Ruth Ann Ruthie, my father's younger sister, 31 years, a hospice nurse left an envelope in my mailbox. $500 and a note. Don't you dare pay me back. I paid her back in 7 weeks. She was furious. She cashed it anyway, because she knew exactly what it cost me to hand over, and let me have it. I've kept my own book since I was 25. Every dollar, both directions. I want you to hold on to that, because in about 40 minutes, it's going to be the most dangerous thing anybody at that table has ever seen. My father died in the fall of 2018, and a year and a half later, the county tried to take his farm. Nobody had paid the property taxes, not in 2018 when we were busy being sad, and not in 2019 when we were busy being busy. In Ohio, if you let real estate taxes go delinquent long enough, the county doesn't send a nice man to talk to you. It publishes your name on a list in the newspaper, and then it takes the land. I found out because I read the Newark Advocate the way I read everything all the way to the back, Kessler, Walter J., Dutch Fork Road, $18,400 and change. I called my mother first. "Let it go, sweetheart," she said. "It's just dirt," I called Dale. He was in a truck. I could hear a compressor. "Nobody's paying that. Dee, you know what 140 acres of clay is worth out there? Let the county eat it." I called Shelby and got a voicemail. Nobody returned. Then I drove to the Licking County Treasurer's office on a Tuesday morning and paid $18,411 out of an account I'd spent 6 years building one deposit at a time. And I went back to work. I never told them, not once. It isn't in the family's version of the story, and never has been. It's in my book, page 11, blue ink, and in the margin beside it, I wrote one word why, and I've never fully answered it. The closest I get is this. My father told me everything in between is bookkeeping, and I decided somebody in this family was going to keep them. 7 years passed. That's what land does. It sits there worth nothing until, very suddenly, it is worth something. What happened was electricity. An AEP transmission line runs along the north edge of our ground. 3 towers of it. And my whole life, it was just the ugly thing you looked past to see the barn. Then the data centers came to central Ohio, hyperscale campuses, hundreds of acres each. And the only thing they want more than flat ground and water is a high-voltage line they don't have to build. We had all 3. In February, a man left a business card wedged in the storm door of the empty farmhouse. Northline Land Company. He called 4 days later. He was maybe 29, and he wore leather shoes that had been beautiful that morning. That's what I noticed first. I'd seen him from the road 2 days before, walking the fence line, in February, in a field that is soup from January to April. He had walked all 142 acres in those shoes, ruined them, and never mentioned it. Then he said the number, 30,000 an acre. He said it the way you'd read a weather report. I want to tell you I sat down, that I cried, or called somebody, or looked out at that white tree and felt something rise in my chest. What I actually did was ask him to email the offer, and then I drove to the county recorder's office in Newark. Not the bank, not my mother, the recorder. Because I am a CPA, and before you celebrate an asset, you verify it exists. You pull the chain of title, you confirm ownership. It is the least romantic instinct a person can have, and it is the only reason I still have anything. The clerk was patient. She pulled the deed, then the transfer records, then stopped, went into a different drawer, and came back with a document I had never seen in my life. Transfer on death designation affidavit. Filed March 14, 2016. My father's signature. That cramped welder's hand, pressing too hard the way he always did. Beneficiary Delia Ann Kessler, Seoul. In Ohio, a transfer on death affidavit means the property never enters the estate. No probate, not part of what gets divided, the moment my father stopped breathing. That ground stopped being his and became mine automatically, silently, by operation of law. It had been mine for 7 years. The county tax bill I paid alone in 2019 had been my own, and nobody told me, not my mother, who signed the estate paperwork, not the attorney who closed it. I stood there holding it, and then I asked one more question, and I still don't know what made me ask it. Had anybody else ever requested a copy? She turned to her terminal and checked the access log. Yes, ma'am. 3 weeks ago, she turned the screen so I could read it. Dale W. Kessler, certified copy, paid the $2. My brother had known for 3 weeks. He hadn't called to congratulate me. He'd gone home and started building something. I drove home past our sycamore in the dark, and I did the only thing my father ever taught me to do when the numbers stopped making sense. I wrote it down, date, time, and one line in the margin. Dale knew first. Why is he quiet? Accountants don't like question marks. They have a way of becoming line items. The next morning, I called a lawyer. I want that on the record. Before I called my mother. Before I called anyone with my last name. I called an estate and land attorney in Columbus named Adele Fitch. She is 61. Her voice sounds like fine sandpaper. There's a plant in the corner of her office that is fake, and she knows you're looking at it, and she has never explained it. I laid it out, the offer, the affidavit, the access log with my brother's name on it. She let me finish without a sound. Then she said 3 things. First, it's already yours, and it has been since 2016. Second, that will not stop anybody. Third, and write this down, ownership is a fact. Control is a construction. You have the first one. We have about 5 weeks to build you the second. I asked her whether I could keep the sale quiet. She actually laughed. Delia, the transfer gets recorded. The conveyance fee is calculated off the sale price and filed with the county auditor, and the auditor's site is free and searchable by anyone with a phone. Everyone in that township will know the number by Thursday. This isn't a lottery ticket you can hide in a freezer bag. This is dirt. Dirt talks. So, there was never a secret. I want you to understand that, because people hear stories like mine and say she should have kept her mouth shut. I've thought about that more than they have. There was nothing to keep shut. 142 acres does not fit in a drawer. The only thing I could control was what got built around it. And I had 5 weeks. Sunday dinner. 3 days later, I didn't announce anything. I passed the green beans. I asked Cole about wrestling. It was Dale. Dee's got an offer on the home place, 4.26. He set it to the table, not to me. Then he set his fork down and added, so we should probably talk about how the family handles this. 11 words in that second sentence. I've counted them since. He'd been holding them for 3 weeks, and you could hear that he'd been rehearsing the pause before family. My mother put her hand flat on the tablecloth. Shelby made a small sound, Marcus asked, very smoothly, whether it was cash. And I sat there with my fork halfway up and understood I was not at a dinner. I was at an opening statement. Over the next 48 hours, my family turned into strangers who happened to know my birthday. Shelby started a public Pinterest board called Lake Erie. Someday, 11 pins by Tuesday, including a doc, Marcus emailed me a document titled Kessler Tax Strategy, Draft V3, Version 3. He had revised it twice before showing it to the person it was about. My mother began calling at 7 every evening, never asking for anything that isn't how she works. She'd go through other people's hardships like a rosary. Verna's hip, the Petersons losing their place on Marne Road, her own prescriptions, up $9, bead by bead, until you reached the end holding something you hadn't agreed to hold. And Dale said the word structure so many times I started hearing it in my sleep. Structure, family structure, getting some structure around this. He never once said money, which is how I knew it was the only thing he was saying on day 9. I came in for Sunday dinner, and there was a document at my seat, not on the counter. At my seat, the one I've sat in since I was tall enough to reach the table. 4 pages in a clear plastic cover. Yellow tabs at every signature line. Kessler Family Land Settlement Agreement. My mother 30%, $1,278,000. The reason typed beside it was home and later years. Dale 22%, $937,200. Business stability. Shelby and Marcus 22%, the same figure. Fresh start. Extended family 10%, $426,000. The Kessler Family Fund, administered by Dale 8%, $340,800, and me 8%, $340,800, the same as the fund my brother would be holding on everyone's behalf. I noticed. I'd like you to notice too. I read it twice while 11 people watched me read it, which is its own kind of pressure, and I did not argue, not one word. I've argued with these people my whole life, and it has never once moved a number. I closed the plastic cover and said I'd take it home and read it properly. My mother said, "There's nothing to read, sweetheart, but my father taught me something at that same table, and I'll give it to you free, because it's worth more than anything else in this story." Never sign anything at the table it's served on. They came at me from 3 directions, and I want to walk you through all 3. Because I've since learned it wasn't improvised. Somebody assigned these. My mother went first. I drove out on a Wednesday because she asked me to come alone, and she had the good cups out. It was a complete performance, and I say that with a strange kind of admiration. She cried on the beat, not at the beginning, at the 3rd turn, right where a person's guard drops. She talked about 7 years a widow and the sound the house makes at 4 in the afternoon. She brought up the dress. You have to understand the dress. In 2007, my sister needed a prom dress, and there wasn't money. So my mother sewed one, by hand, over 11 nights. And it was beautiful. And every one of us has had that dress handed to us at some point as evidence of something. God finally sends this family something, she said. And my own daughter wants to put it in a box. I told her I hadn't decided anything yet, which was true, in the way that not yet true things are true. Then she put her hand over mine. She has soft hands. She always has, and delivered the line she'd been building toward the whole afternoon. You'd be selfish to keep it, Delia. Your father would be ashamed of what you're becoming. I drove home. I got as far as the end of the driveway before I noticed the flat rate envelopes stacked on the passenger seat of her Buick. 3 of them, addressed in her handwriting to my Aunt Peg, my Aunt Corinne, and my Aunt Denise. She had photocopied the agreement and mailed it to 3 women in 2 states before she ever showed it to me. That's not a mother panicking. That's a campaign with a distribution list. Dale came second. He walked into my office at 11:40 on a Thursday, past Yoli, past a client in the waiting chairs, and he sat on the corner of my desk on the Resnick file, which I had to reprint, and he said, "This family has a structure. D. Dad's gone. That makes me the one who signs off." And I said the thing I'd been holding for 11 years. You were executor for 14 months. Dale, that ended in 2019. You didn't get promoted. You just forgot to quit. He stood up. He got as far as the door. And then he stopped. And something came out of him lower and truer than anything he'd said in a month. Some of us don't have until Christmas. He didn't look back. I wrote that sentence down after he left. Exact words. In the margin, next to the question mark I'd put there in February. Shelby came third, and Shelby doesn't fight. Shelby campaigns. She started forwarding articles into the family group chat. Lottery winners bankrupt in 5 years. Heirs who fell apart. Always the same caption. So sad when money changes people. Never my name. Never a single word that could be quoted back at her. It got to my mother's church. It got to the Petersons. And then Cousin Tara called me and asked for $25,000 for a business. Sort of. She wasn't specific, and I said no, as gently as I have ever said anything. And there was a pause, and she said, "Wow, so it's true what Shelby's been saying. Sit with the arithmetic there." I had refused exactly one person, exactly one thing. I hadn't bought so much as a new coat. The only people who had made plans for that land were the ones calling me a hoarder. But here is the part that actually cracked it open. And nobody told me. I worked it out myself, at my own desk, with the polish and cut leather coming up through the floor. I used to do the books for Kessler Excavating, 6 years, at cost, until 3 years ago when Dale moved to a cheaper preparer in Heath because I asked too many questions. So I sat there and I looked at 22%, $937,200, and I knew that number. It was the equipment loan, the excavator and the lowboy trailer, 2019 7-year note, and I know the balance schedule because I built it. Nobody told me. I was just the only person in that family who had ever seen his books. 22% plus the 8% family fund he'd be managing. That's not a fair share. That's a payoff amount. Then I remembered the other thing about 2019. That was the year I paid $18,400 in back taxes to keep the county from taking our father's farm. And it was the year I co-signed my brother's equipment loan. I'd forgotten. He hadn't. Here's what actually made me sad. Sitting in that shoe polish smell with the numbers looking up at me. If Dale had come to my office with his books under his arm and said, "D, I'm drowning," I'd have run those numbers with him that same night. Restructuring is literally my job. I've saved 3 companies in this county smaller than his. He knew that. Instead, he kicked my door in with a document and called it order. It took Adele 3 weeks to build it. An Ohio Legacy Trust, a real instrument. Chapter 5816. One of the few states where this is even possible. Spendthrift clause. An independent corporate trustee in Columbus who has never met my mother and never will. We called it the Sycamore Trust. "Understand what you're signing," Adele said. "Once this is funded, you cannot hand out the principal, not to your mother, not to your brother, not to yourself on a weak Tuesday. If someone pressures you, the trustee is legally required to refuse. That is the entire point of the instrument." Then she told me about the protector. A trust protector is a person who holds one power if the trustee stops doing its job. They can remove it. No salary, no share, just the standing to say no on my behalf. In writing. Forever. Adele asked who I trusted with that. I said, "The one who pulled over in the rain." Ruthie laughed for a full minute when I told her. Then she stopped laughing and said, So the only thing you're leaving me is a job. The only thing you'd take, I said. She thought about that a while. Then, your father would have done the exact same thing, and he'd have been just as insufferable about it. Then, she said, sit down. There's something you don't know about 1987. My father had a brother, Emmett. When my grandfather died, Emmett was left 40 acres, and my mother 33 years old. 6 years married in organized a family meeting. There were papers. There was a notary. Everyone sat and watched him sign, because only a selfish man turns his back on family. And Emmett could take a lot of things, but not that. Not in a crowded room. 2 years later, the money was gone. Emmett moved to Cadiz and never came back. Not once. Not for my father's funeral. Walt started keeping that book the same year, Ruthie said, nodding at it. Your father watched it happen and couldn't stop it. He was a quiet man, so he did a quiet thing. He wrote it down. I want to say something here that doesn't help my case. Yoli's family isn't like mine. When her mother's furnace went out in February, 4 cousins in Lorraine split it before anybody had to ask. Nobody kept score. Yoli mentioned it to me the way you'd mention weather. I went home that night and sat with how much that hurt, because it means it isn't money. Money doesn't do this. Money just turns the lights on in a room that was already furnished. My family didn't get greedy in March. My family got discovered in March. Both of those are families. That's the part I'm still working on. There was one more thing, and I owe it to my mother to tell it. I brought her blood pressure medicine on a Thursday. No audience. She was at the table with the old photo albums out, and for about 11 minutes, she wasn't performing. She told me about her mother, Ida, widowed at 48, moved into a rented half house in Zanesville, died at 59 in an apartment heated by a space heater. The family paid for the casket on installments. I've been afraid of being poor since I was 9 years old, she said, flat, no tissue. You don't ever stop hearing the sound the electric company makes at the door. For about 3 seconds, I was going to give her everything. Then she patted my hand and finished the thought in that same flat voice. So you understand why the split has to happen. A good daughter would have offered before we had to ask, Ruthie. On the phone that night. Fear explains a person, honey. It doesn't excuse them. My mother called on Friday to invite me to a celebration dinner. She read the guest list like a menu. Then, at the end, casually, the way you'd mention there'd be pie, and Marcus arranged for a notary at 7. A notary for a family dinner. My mother had catered my surrender and hired a witness. Wear something nice, sweetheart, and bring a pen. Adele told me I never had to go. Mail them a letter. You never have to sit in that room. I thought about it. Skipping it was safe. And I've spent 6 months being honest with myself about why I went anyway. It wasn't stubbornness. It wasn't revenge. Though I'd like that better. Somewhere under 11 years of arithmetic, there was still a woman who wanted to run one final entry and see if the column would balance this time. I already knew the answer. I ran it anyway. That's not stupidity. Ask any accountant. We don't reconcile because we expect a surprise. We reconcile because we need the proof in writing. Saturday night, I packed an ivory folder. 3 things went inside it. My father's farm record book went on top, and it wasn't one of the 3. That one wasn't for them. That one rode along in my bag like a hand on my shoulder. At 11, my phone lit up. Shelby, don't embarrass Mom tomorrow. She's been through enough. My grandmother's oak table. The chandelier that's buzzed since 2009, which everyone in that house stopped hearing except me. Verna Petite, holding her purse like a seatbelt. Bernie cool on a folding chair, stamp bag on her knees, and at my place, the pen with the bow. My mother tapped her glass. "Tonight, we heal this family." I sat, folded my hands on the ivory folder, said nothing. Adele's voice in my head. "Let them finish the whole show. Witnesses work both ways." Marcus presented, passing out copies like hymnals. Fair split, everyone wins. A salesman's rhythm, pausing for the nod. And Delia keeps 8%, 340,000. Plus, we handle the family fund, so she's never burdened. Honestly, she comes out ahead here, Tara said to no one. "That's so generous." My mother stood and looked down the table. "You'd be selfish to keep it. Delia, tonight you get to prove you love this family." I didn't touch the pen. One question. Marcus, your percentages, gross sale price, or net proceeds after tax? The room made a sound like a record catching. He flipped a page, then flipped it back. Which, in my profession, we call the answer. I went to work, in the voice I use to read numbers to clients. Dad died 7 years ago, stepped up basis, 483,000, sale price, 4260, taxable gain 3,777,000. Federal capital gains, 20%, plus 3.8 net investment income tax, which nobody here has heard of and all of you are about to pay. Ohio on top. The tax bill is just over $1 million. Notary. Write this down. I am the seller of record. The 1099-S comes to me. Not Mom, not Dale, me. Your agreement gives me $340,800. My tax bill is $1,003,000. I don't get a share. I go $662,000 into debt to hand each of you a check. It landed one person at a time. Uncle Gene frowned at his copy like it had said something rude. Tara took her hand off the silverware. Krista looked at her husband and didn't look back. Verna Petite looked at my mother without kindness for the first time all night. My mother rapped her knuckles on the oak the gavel from my whole childhood. Sign first, numbers later. And that those words, in that order, from my own mother is when I opened the folder. Before anybody signs, Marcus, read page 3 out loud. You skipped it, and I'd like to know why. He couldn't. So I read it. Under the 4th yellow tab was a financial power of attorney naming my brother my agent on every account I hold. You called this standard paperwork. Standard paperwork doesn't hide. I slid the trustee's letter across. It stopped on the words, "Everyone wins." The land is not for sale by me. It was conveyed to the Sycamore Trust in April. The trust is irrevocable. Its principal may not be assigned, pledged, gifted, or withdrawn on demand by any person including the beneficiary. The money already has a home. It moved in weeks ago. Before you set this table, nothing I sign tonight moves it out. Not your agreement, not a promise, not a guilt trip. Even I can't hand it to you. That was the point. Dale came out of his chair, both palms down. Undo it. Irrevocable means what it means. Dale, it's the first word they teach. So he played his last card, the equipment loan, my signature beside his. I pulled my credit report 3 weeks ago. The trust settled my joint liability Tuesday as a debt of the beneficiary, which is permitted, not a gift to you, which isn't. You thought you were holding a leash. It got cut 8 days ago, and you didn't get $1 out of it. That's the only thing I ever took from you, the power you had over me. Shelby's voice broke. You planned this? No, I prepared. Planning is what you did, Shelby. Planning is a notary and a pen with a bow on it. My mother, in the low voice that ended every argument in that house before I was born, after everything this family sacrificed for you, name one, I said gently. One sacrifice with a date on it. Then the statement of record, 8 pages, brass clip, column 1, what I gave $74,900, column 2, what I asked for and where the amount belonged. The answer I got, we don't have it to spare. 11 years, same sentence at every door I knocked on. So here's my answer, and I'd like the notary to hear it. We don't have it to spare. Turns out, neither do I. I set my father's book down, opened it to the last page, turned it toward my mother. Dad kept a book, too. The loaned column ran the length of the page. Every name in that room was on it. The repaid column was white. The last line, in pencil Delia. Beside it, very small, no entry ever needed. Ruthie read it upside down and put her hand over her mouth. That's when my mother stood, gripped her chest, and announced her heart was doing something. A chair went over, but she had invited a hospice nurse. Ruthie came around without hurrying, sat her down, took a cuff from that bottomless purse, pumped it, read it, let the air out slowly. You're fine, Bobby. Sit down and drink some water. And the performance, having been examined and billed correctly, ended. Bernie Kuehl quietly closed her stamp bag. My mother pointed at me, straight-armed, Old Testament. You are no daughter of mine if you walk out that door, Dale said. You'll be alone, every holiday, every empty chair. I've been alone in this family for 11 years. Dale, the only difference now is better furniture. At the doorway, I turned around. Mom selfish is the word people reach for when your money stops being theirs. I've been called it for 5 weeks. And here's what I notice. I slept fine last night. First time in years. I took my coat off the hook that's been mine since I was tall enough to reach it. The agreement stayed on the table, unsigned, yellow tabs pointing at nothing. Beside a pen with a bow on it, there's a line in the trust nobody at that dinner ever read. And I didn't say it out loud because it wasn't theirs to hear. I didn't sell my father's farm. I sold 130 acres of it. The last 12, the house, the barn, the creek, and a sycamore. My great-grandfather was already too late to have planted are held by the trust under a conservation easement, permanent, recorded, which means the ground is now legally protected from Northline, from my brother, from my mother. And this is the part that matters from me. I can't sell it on a week Tuesday either. That's not sentiment. That's the instrument working in both directions. And it's the only kind of promise I trust. 9 weeks later, Dale didn't call. He came to the office and stood at Yoli's desk until she looked up, then said 4 words. I'd like an appointment. Yoli put him down for Thursday at 2. I made him wait the 4 days. He brought 2 banker's boxes. 9 hours, line by line. I found $14,000 in misclassified equipment depreciation and a restructuring his bank would actually sign. He sold a truck. He kept the company. I did not give him $1. Monday, Yoli mailed him an invoice. 9 hours at my standard rate, $1,125. He paid it in 9 days. That check is in my desk drawer. I never cashed it. It's the only debt in this family that has ever closed, and I'd rather have the paper. Then I drove 6 hours to Cadiz. Emmett Kessler is 79. He works part-time at a hardware store because his back won't let him stand a full shift and Social Security doesn't quite reach. He didn't recognize me, then he did, and went pale. And the first thing my uncle said to me was, Whatever they sent you down here for, the answer's no. 4 hours at his kitchen table, he cried twice. I didn't cry at all, which is a thing about myself I'm still deciding how to feel about. Before I left, I told him the trust would cover his medical, paid straight to the providers, for as long as he needs it. He refused 3 different ways. I let him get all the way to the end. Then I said the only sentence that was ever going to work. It isn't from me, Emmett. It's from Walt. He wrote you down. He just never got to close the entry. He put his hand over his mouth and nodded at the table. Nobody at that dinner knows about it. Nobody at that dinner ever will. In October, a thank you card came to the office in careful 12-year-old handwriting. A sparrow drawn on the front, Junie. Nobody told her to send it. I drove out that Saturday. And I'll be honest that I thought about it a long time first. Because there's a version of what I'm doing that just raises 3 more people who expect an envelope. So I didn't bring her money. I brought her a blank ledger. Same kind, cloth cover. She asked what she was supposed to write in it. She's 12. She has no money. That's not the point, I said. The point is that in about 15 years, somebody is going to tell you what you owe them, and you're going to want to already know. She thought about it the way her grandfather used to chin down. No rush. Then she wrote the date on the first line, and under it, in pencil, tuition. Paid. Not alone. Aunt Delia said write down which one it is. In June. My mother asked me to help her set up a spreadsheet. Not for anything, just to see where it goes, she said. I watched my 72-year-old mother write down the first entry of her life at the same table where she once told me there wasn't $900 to spare. I have not decided what it means. Some days I think she's finally counting. Some days I think she's building a case for what I owe her. We have never discussed it, and we're not going to. An open account isn't the same as a bad one. It just means somebody's still writing. In November, a woman came into my office, 68, school lunch lady, 31 years, 9 minutes before she got to it. In 2003, her husband's injury settlement came through. Her family held a meeting. There were papers. There was a notary. There's always a notary. People think the stamp makes it true. She signed. 23 years later, she worries about a heating bill the way other people worry about a company's taxes. I'll be honest, because this is the part I can't dress up. I could not fix it. There was nothing to fix. 23 years is 23 years, and no attorney in Ohio can reach back that far. I checked twice, because I'm me. So I did the only thing there was. I took out a legal pad and drew 2 columns. Start in 2003. Tell me every dollar, what you gave, what you asked for, and what they said when you asked. It took 2 hours. She remembered all of it. They always do. When we finished, I tore the pages off, squared them, put them in her hands. She said, "What am I supposed to do with this?" "It's not evidence." "No, it's not evidence. It's a record. Nobody ever wrote you down. Loretta, somebody should have." She held those pages against her coat with both hands, the way you hold something warm walking to a cold car. She said, "I thought I was the only one. You are not the only one. There is no version of this where the paperwork works backwards. It doesn't. I wish it did. But it works forward. It always works forward. My father handed me a book when I was 9, and I spent 27 years thinking he'd taught me a skill. He'd handed me away to be witnessed, and he hoped I'd never need it. I needed it. Now I keep a stack of blank ones in my bottom drawer. I give one away about every 6 weeks, and I've never once had to explain what it's for. The people who call you selfish for keeping what's yours were never planning to share what was theirs. And the people who love you don't need it in writing, but they will never once be offended that you wrote it down. If your family ever did the math on your life at a dinner table, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. And one number you never got back. I read every one. If you've ever needed somebody to write you down, type "Start" in column 1, and I'll know exactly what you carried in with you. If this reminded you that no is a complete sentence, or that paperwork done early beats tears done late, send it to whoever's always been the reliable one. Subscribe, and I'll see you at the next table.